business always talks about themselves and they don't talk about why a customer should care about that business.
All right, welcome back, passionate investors. I'm your host, George Roberts, the author of Passionate Living Through Passive Investing. As business owners, the need to define our brand and market is paramount. That's why I'm excited today to have the pleasure of interviewing Jimi Gibson, a leading voice in digital marketing. He's the VP of Brand Communications at Thrive Agency, a TEDx speaker, and a Forbes Agency Council member. But that's only part of what makes today's guest interesting. He started out his career as a professional magician, which makes a weird amount of sense once you hear how he thinks about messaging. He's created something called the Magic Script, a framework that helps brands connect with people in a real and human way. He's one of those rare folks who can make marketing feel less like noise and more like a conversation worth having. And now it's time to introduce our exciting guest. Welcome to the show, Jimi.
Hey, George, glad to be here. Excited about our conversation.
I am, me too. So is that the sort of thing that you're talking about, being, personalizing things? Maybe as I had it put by one boss, he said that part of being a boss is, he had to, he was doing somersaults one day. It was like 8 o'clock. And I guess he was just entertaining the people that decided to work late. And he said, part of being a boss for him was, not being afraid to make an ass. So I don't know how that's going to land. I think a lot of people are going to say crazy. I don't know where you're coming from, but I think I know that it was really coming from the heart from him, that's really connecting with his team and, I guess kind of rewarding them for sticking around,
Sure.
putting in some really late evenings. So anyway, so how do we make that, craft that personal message? How do you build that connection?
Yeah, and I think what you just mentioned that you're doing for yourself is absolutely a great opportunity. People always say, I'd love to write a book, but not a lot of people follow through on that. And so it is a point of credibility. It is a way to get you introduced to other folks. And I'm sure you've got plenty of stories on how that's been able to happen. And then to be able to take a book and then slice and dice that into a variety of content that you can use in a myriad of situations. I think it really depends on the person. We probably are familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk, who started out doing wine reviews from his family business. And so he just jumped in and started doing really funny reviews that were making fun basically of all the snooty language that is
Oh
typically
yeah.
associated with doing wine reviews. And look where he is now. He's probably got a team of multiple hundreds of people that work with him on a huge that has nothing to do with wine anymore. And he was very good on video. You wrote a book, you've got a YouTube channel, so you're very comfortable in those venues. And so play to your strengths and go, what is my primary area of content or my pillar content that I'm going to commit to? And then be regular in that process and take it. Some people are very direct and they're going to tell the audience, do this, don't do that. And if you don't do it,
Sure.
you're going to crash and burn. Other people are more nuanced and a little more humble about the way they go about it. But I think, I went through a stage a couple of years ago where I never shared anything online. And unfortunately, right now, if you're not online, you're kind of invisible. And so you've
Yeah.
got to get over this initial apprehension to put yourself out there. And once you do it and you get the good feedback, it ends up being fun, right? And so just jump in, be okay with being bad at first, and then
Hmm.
hone your skills and craft it and reach out to people. The interesting thing I mentioned about LinkedIn, there's a billion users worldwide, but only 1% are actually putting out content. So if you do decide to put out content on a regular basis, you're going to be better than 99% of the folks who are not out there putting things, and you will be amazed at the connections that happen.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I would like to think that I'm one of the more humble people. I don't just tell people you gotta go out and buy classy apartments, renovate, reposition, and then get a whole bunch of investors in your deals. Like when I talk about private equity, I talk about everything from song royalties, merchant cash
Mm.
advances, private lending, all these sorts of things, most of which I've done, some of which I mean, I wish I could have a finger in every pot, but can't. And I just love your advice about just getting out there. I think it's so true, and being comfortable with being bad. I mean, if anybody wants to go back and listen to the first interview in this series, I've done over 200, and that was my wife interviewing me. And if you listen to that first interview, now she was the interviewer, and I think she's a great interviewer. But I was very different. How I'm on camera now versus how I was 3 or 4 years ago is 100% different. So, yeah, I like to do that from time to time. I won't name the podcast, but one whom I very highly respect. I was told to go back and listen to the first few episodes and hear how they had the wrong microphone, how they didn't really know what they were doing, sound quality, everything is bad. So I love that. So I guess the idea, and this is another thing that I play up on, I don't know if I'm really injecting myself in here, or this is what you're saying, but pivot. One of the things that I learned from being in software development, not me myself so much developing the software, but in being data science and understanding those techniques, is just to pivot, to be agile. And you get together, you put out a prototype, you do something, maybe you show it to your client, maybe it's what they're looking for, maybe it isn't, but by being willing to fail fast. And I'm thinking of the can't even say it, but Eric Ries's book. I want to say that it's the intelligence startup, but the idea that you just get out there, you put your minimum viable product out, and you pivot. I think that's very, very, very powerful. So, in other words, you don't have to decide that you're going to be a superhero and that you're going to talk about data science. At first, just get out there and get good at making content.
Yeah, and I think it's a dialogue, and until you put something out, it's just like we talked about magic. I can practice, in my living room, but until I get out in front of an audience, I don't hear the feedback of whether it's good or bad. You talk about podcasting and getting better at it. You had a goal that you wanted to really put in the time. I wanted to get better at video. I had never really been in front of the camera. I'd been behind the camera in my work in marketing. And so I made a choice that I was going to put out a video every day, Monday through Friday this year. Well, after about 137 videos, I realized that LinkedIn was really not pushing video and I needed to pivot. And so, however much I wanted to push video on people, it was not going to be something that would be easy for me to overcome the algorithm in LinkedIn. So I pivoted to more written content. And so now I'm going back and going, okay, if I did do video, what would it take to break through that algorithm? And it's probably better suited for like a TikTok or an Instagram where they are promoting that type of thing. So yeah, I think I probably waited too long, to your point, fail quick and pivot. So those are all lessons when it comes to creating content.
Yeah,
For
great
sure.
lesson. And that was one of the first things I reached out to a podcaster that I highly respected, had a huge successful launch and been successful ever since. And it took me a little while to get the audience. And the first thing she told me is, you have to be on every channel. And it makes sense because I've got an assistant. She does a great job.
Yeah.
And when we make one piece of content, we're putting it out everywhere. And I think the next step is, now we've got to get the AI tools and then just have the AI put it out everywhere for us, build the workflows, and do some great things. So glad that we were able to touch on a lot of things, including, how to get AI, or how AI is changing the world, certainly changing everything. But also, I wanted to ask you maybe a little more personal question. How we approach investments, very personal, and everybody does it differently. Do you have any advice for people coming from marketing, what they might be looking for, or how they should possibly approach things differently, or find their approach, I think is more to the point.
So more personalized approach to how they would invest. So one of the things, Thrive as a company feel like we want to give back. And so we actually take a portion of our proceeds, and I wouldn't call this investing, but I would call it giving back. And so I would say the same principles would apply to investing. What do you have a heart for? What perhaps is in your background that would connect you to that investment? And I would say it would be personal for everybody. And so, just as an example, in supporting entrepreneurship, the focus of the business is we want to help business owners grow through the power of the internet. And so that's just a one sentence thing that the founder came up with 20 years ago. And so that drives all of us. And For every new client that we bring on board, we ask a team member to choose somebody through the Kiva loan program to give a micro loan. We also encourage folks to spend time donating their time. And then we have a money match program for people who want to help a local organization. And so if there was a one sentence approach that you as a person could have as to how you would approach your investments, can that be a guiding factor so that there is some relationship or some continuity that would flow in the choices that you make? We work with a lot of franchise businesses that folks are investing in a variety of franchises or multiple locations that they may actually be actively involved with, or they may be a silent investor. One of the first questions that we get into, and then I also mentioned private equity, I would say that there are a lot of private equity now moving into a lot of home service businesses, whether it be pest control, plumbing.
Oh, huge.
Was speaking to a person the other day who owned quite a few hair salons. And so I ask the question all the time, what is your connection to this business? And I think when there is some sort of personal connection, whether it be, it can be anything really, it just gives you a more, I hate to use the word soul pleasing relationship with that business, but it does give you some extra element of you're going to make this work. You're going to have warm fuzzies when things go well. One of the challenges that we've seen is when we work with an owner who has multiple businesses and there's really no personal connection, there isn't that fire, there isn't that drive to make it any better than it was because there's no click that happens with them personally. So I would say those are the personal experiences that I've had related to owners who have invested in businesses and want to see them do better for a variety of reasons.
All right, beautiful. And is there any one biggest mistake that you see people making in their marketing today?
Yeah, I would say overall, if I could make one blanket statement, is the business always talks about themselves and they don't talk about why a customer should care about that business. And we're not having empathy for why somebody would choose you over somebody else. If you're just talking about how many businesses you or how many locations you have, how many units you have,
Oh, yeah.
we've been in business for
We have a
20
little too much of that
years.
in commercial real estate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. And yeah, it reminds me of the pumpkin, what is it? The Pumpkin Plan by Michael Michalowicz,
Yep.
but a great book. But yeah, standing out is huge. And yeah, great example of that. Anyway, I want to ask you at least one more difficult question before we go into something a little more lighthearted. How do you handle failure?
Wow. Failure personally used to beat me up, pretty driven person. And so I would take it personally. And so what I learned to do is I actually personified failure as an event, not as a failure on my part. And so we can get over an event, but we can't get over an identity. And so I will name that as a point in time and I will reference that and figure out what I can learn from that. And that helps disassociated the failure with me failing as a person. There are a lot of things that go into failure. It could be personal situation, it could be internal, external things that happen. And so, yeah, I would say treating it as an event and not as something that I have to carry forward.
Yeah, very deep. Okay, now this is something I don't do with every guest, but I can tell that you're a performer, and so you're definitely unflappable. And I'd like to ask you some whimsical questions, just
Sure.
sort of get to know you better, hopefully be entertaining. If you could dive into a pool of popcorn, Jimmy, would it be buttered or plain?
Well, if I was eating it, it would be butter. It would be plain. If I'm diving in, I think the buttered would make it a better experience.
Okay, I love it. And let me just see. Oh, where do I have my other crazy questions? Okay, cats or dogs?
Dogs. I've had
Right.
both.
Morning person or night owl?
Um, Morning person recovering from being a night owl.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are in that position. Right. Okay, how about this? Favorite holiday?
Wow. I would say Halloween.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah.
Houdini died on Halloween. It's kind of cool. I mean, of course, I
Who?
love Christmas and Easter, but
Oh,
kind of the magic thing for Halloween.
Okay, okay. Interesting. I know my son is a huge fan of Frank Zappa, and he tells me that I feel like he's got a whole album devoted to Halloween, but of course he would because he's got over 60 albums.
Oh, of course.
Uh, all right. So if your life were a board game, what would it be called and how would you win?
Oh, wow. I don't know why this came to mind, but it was I guess a preschool game called Shoots and Ladders, and you climb up the ladder, and then if you roll the dice in the wrong day, you go down a slide, and it's just this constant up and down. And so I guess the only way to win is to keep climbing the ladders and don't worry about the slides.
All right. Love it. Love it. Okay. So in a moment we'll get out my cards, but got a just a little foreshadowing here. Oh yeah, one question before we go into the lightning round.
Yeah.
So on a scale of 1 to Superman, how would you rate your lightning round skills?
Oh gosh, I would say less than half Superman.
Okay, okay. I think you're being modest because the last series of questions was essentially a lightning round in itself. Okay, if
Yeah.
you'd be known for only one thing, Jimmy, what would that be?
Helping my neighbor realize that they're good enough. And yeah.
Okay, what is one mistake which has taught you the most?
Um, I would say when I went from being an employee to managing an agency, I had a client tell me that I had not stepped into my role and I should have contacted her sooner because of my position. And so I always remember that. Yeah, that was gracious of her to tell me that.
Interesting. All right, okay, so now it's time for me to grab for my deck of cards here.
Oh boy, that is
And
a
I
huge
always
deck.
have one last whimsical question. So just tell me when to stop cutting the deck.
All right. One more cut. One.
Okay,
Okay.
one more.
There we
All
go.
right. All right. Would you prefer money for a housekeeper, cook, gardener, or personal secretary?
Hmm. Well, my wife would say cook, but she's an awesome cook. So I'm going to go with gardener. I do not enjoy that.
Okay. Can you give us a tip or trick that investors can implement in their businesses today?
And knowing your audience, I'm sure they are really good with their numbers, but I would say make sure uh, you have your dashboard updated. From a marketing perspective, if you're measuring the wrong things, you're going to be guided down a path that you don't want to be. So make sure you're measuring the right things.
Yes. What is one book that every investor should read?
Wow. I would say it's not an investment book, but it's a open your mind to the possibilities book. And it's a book called I'm Possible, which, if you run it all together, is impossible. And it's a book written by a photographer, but he's basically a philanthropist. And so I would say he's investing in the world. And the gentleman's name is Jeremy Cowart, Cowart. And I recommend that book a lot. And when I read it, my brain was just going 100 miles an hour. So I think that would be a good one.
And finally, can you send us out with a quote to help forge our listeners as leaders and entrepreneurs?
Sure. I would say there's a quote by Einstein that says, any development in technology is indiscernible from magic. And especially in this AI world, I think that quote, if we look at AI as magic and we don't understand what's going on behind the scenes, then we're at arm's length. And I would encourage everybody to maybe strip back the veil of the magic, understand what's going on behind the scenes. And I think that can be leveraged in business in amazing ways.
All right, great stuff. Well, just one final question. I want to make sure that our listeners know how to reach out to you. So, email, website, carrier pigeon, smoke signals. What is the best way to get in touch with Jimmy Gibson?
Yeah. Short of a magic incantation, I would say LinkedIn is where I hang out. I post every day some sort of tip or thing related to marketing or leadership and some magic. And then the website for Thrive Agency is just thriveagency.com.
All right, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with our audience.
Absolutely. Thank you.